Order, can I have roll call, please?
Councilmember Luis Cabrera,
Present.
Councilmember Maria Cecilia Cruz, Vice Mayor Tadeo Azael de la Hoya,
Present.
Councilmember Esteban Rosales,
Present.
Councilmember Lisette Servin,
Present.
Councilmember Javier Vargas,
Present.
Mayor Nieves Raydell, Vice Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Item number 2A, discussion and review on any and all matters regarding the 5-year projection of the city of San Luis. Ms. Rola Encinas? Or Jenny?
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. I'll start the presentation this afternoon. Sonia, can you please bring out the first presentation? I want to apologize to the staff. We actually had this meeting with all the department directors and the assistants and the supervisors and the managers. It was a 3-hour presentation. We'll try to cut it to 1 hour if possible. Obviously, it's a lot of information, but we're here to answer any questions you might have. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start. As I started in February of 2023 as an assistant city manager. In July of 2023, I took on the acting city manager role. During that time, between July and December, I tried to focus on what my commitment was going to be to the council and to the community for the next couple of months under that position. Now, I try to keep it simple. I made 3 specific commitments to the council. Now, the first commitment is financial stability. What I mentioned to you, and I made this presentation back in December of 2023, I said that we were going to try to push for the property tax because that was a revenue that we needed. I mentioned that we were going to try to acquire more grants because at that time, we were going through a Thriving Communities program where they were providing us the skills to become more competitive, to acquire a grant. And I mentioned that I was going to focus on the fees. We were going to evaluate all the fees throughout the different departments. The second commitment was the efficiency and accountability. I mentioned that we were going to look at the organizational structure to make sure that people were in the right positions so that we were more efficient and accountable. I mentioned that we were going to focus on the policies and procedures, evaluate them, and if there was no policies and procedures, set them in place. And I mentioned that we were going to make a lot of improvements, and what that meant was we were going to make a lot of changes. And overall, with the intent of increasing efficiency and reducing costs. The third commitment was strategic planning. We said we were going to try to do a 5-year strategic plan where we were focused on our mission and our strategies. We want to provide the best customer service and so on. We also said that we were going to focus on the capital improvement plan, which is something that we started. And then we were going to take a look as part of the financial stability, a 5-year financial plan. Now, when I started evaluating the financials between that time, and I started looking at it from this perspective, I took a look at what was the best practices. And I won't read this to you completely. You can kind of read it, but this came from the GFOA, which it talked about the best practices. It talked about, being able to balance a budget. But, it does mention that a balanced budget may not, in fact, be financially sustainable. So when we took a look at that, it talked about recurring revenues and non-recurring revenues. But I think the one item that I want you to focus on was the last sentence, which says, a true structurally balanced budget is one that supports financial sustainability for multiple years into the future. That's the one area that I wanted to focus on. Now, what I did, I took a look at the past 5 years, the historical data. And I started, and this information that you see is actually part of the finance director's financial presentation during the budget retreat. And again, I'm not going to go over all the information, you can read it, but I highlighted a few of the items that I wanted you to pay attention to. The first one was in 2020. It is critical we increase revenues or reduce expenditures for these funds. That was in 2020, that was COVID. In 2021, we were kind of coming out of COVID. It said, monitor the budget against actual revenues and expenditure continuously. Delay hiring of non-essential positions, eliminate non-essential operating spending. That was 21. In 2022, what we said is, we're growing too fast. We can't keep up with the infrastructure needs. We need to diversify our revenue. In 2023, that's when, remember, I stepped into this position. We had some positive carryovers because we had ARPA funding because of COVID. And look at the last sentence. In FY22, we project the salary budget will be 2.4 million below budget due to non-field positions. So then what do I do when I come into this role in 2023? I start doing projects and I start filling positions. But then comes 2024. For financial sustainability, operating expenditure increases must match with recurring revenue streams. So if you can see the pattern from those days, from this historical data, is like, hey, we got to be conservative. Hey, let's stop, hiring people. We need more funding. Hey, we got positive, that cushion that we talked about. Let's spend the money. Wait. We got to stop. So if you look at the historical data, even though it's important, we were making decisions based from one year to another. We weren't looking at the next 5 years of what we should be looking at. So let me give you one-on-one on the state share revenue. This is some of the things that we found out that maybe our community doesn't understand, and we wanted to make sure that our employees understood. Our state share revenue is some of the revenue that we get, right? The vehicle license plate, we get 20% of that revenue. You can see on this one, we had the historical data because it's based on population and it's a specific formula. We cannot go into the future because we don't know what the growth is going to be like. Highway users is the gas tax. That's what we call it, right? 18 cents on the per gallon per gasoline. So this HERF revenue is what we use to build roads. So if you take a look at that HERF funding, the cost of construction has gone up by 30–40%. What can we actually do with 3 million, 4 million? You guys seen the projects, how much they cost. Why do you think we've been doing phasing of these projects? But what we also been doing is the community requests and demands new roads because it's understandable because we're growing in the traffic situation. But we can't do it with $3 million. So the general fund has been subsidizing highway users and providing funding in order for us to do these projects. The state transaction privilege tax is what they call the sales tax. And let me skip one and I'll go back to the other one, the other slide. This is the rates for Yuma County. As you can see, you see the 4%, that's the sales tax for the city. That's the state rate that is mentioned in the last slide. And then Yuma County keeps 1.1%. So when we took at that combined rate, we're looking at 10.71 sales tax. That's when they say, oh, well, the city of San Luis has the highest tax. Yeah, because we don't have other revenues that are coming in. So we rely on our sales tax. If you look at Welton doesn't have a property tax and it's pretty high up there. But Somerton is high, but yet they did a property tax and they kept the rate at the same. So coming back to this, when it comes to the state income tax, and I'll read this because it's really important for you guys to understand this, is the voters in 1972, in exchange for cities and towns giving up the authority to assess local income tax and local luxury tax like liquor and tobacco, we were getting 15% of the overall state collected taxes. But in 2024, the legislature passed a bill where they said, well, everybody's gonna have a flat income tax of 2.5%, because what they want is they want people to have more money in their pockets. But that meant that if I earn $100,000 and Councilmember Cabrera earns $50,000, we're both paying 2.5. Well, what that meant is it meant less revenue for the city. We're still required to provide the services, but those revenues, look at what we were getting in 2024, $9 million. Now we're getting $7 million. Those are the type of legislature actions that affects our community. If you recall, we've been talking about the food tax for a while. That's $4 million impact that would cost us. That's the, where am I? That's the $4 million in the TPT. So those type of policies and actions, it triggers down to our community and affects us. Now, let me see. So what I'm gonna do now is Rola's gonna kind of walk you through the actual numbers. And I'll step in if I need to clarify something, and then I'll finish up the presentation. Rola?
Good evening, Vice Mayor, council members, and my coworkers here, the team. So we are going to review a detail of the general fund. We are going to review the long-term financial planning for general fund. Sonia, is a general fund presentation, please. General fund. We have to think that the general fund is our main checking account. For fiscal year 26, that is our current budget that we are now living. The total revenues we budget is 35.1 million. Total expenditures is 39.7 million, and we have a negative net result on 4.6 million, meaning that we tap in our reserve for 4.6 million. I would like to explain the categories of revenues on the general fund. So the revenues for category are listed there, and the amounts that we budgeted for fiscal year 26 are there, and the accounts that are included, each one of them. You can see that taxes or city sales tax is 17.6 million, and intergovernmental, that is shared state revenue, is 15.6 million. You can see here on the graph that city sales tax are 50%, 50.3% of the general fund revenues, and intergovernmental, that means the state share revenue is 44%. Together, we have 94.5% of total revenues for general funds, meaning that our main sources of revenue are for taxes, city sales tax and state share revenues. Why this matter is because it's like a home, your home. So paychecks is our revenues and cover expenses. Our bank saving account is fund balance and is for emergency and large one-time project. Let's say you have to fix something in a large amount in your house, you have to tap in your saving account. So that means that we also need to tap in our reserves fund. What are the challenges? Our expenses are rising faster than revenues, and without new income, we will dip into savings more often. Those are general fund expenses by category, and you can see the most important and the large expenses is for salary and wage. On that graph, we can see that the salary and related expenses are 67.4% of general fund expenditures. If you want to see what does mean special services, we can go back. Back. Special services are professional services, contractual services, legal, audit fees, special services, travel, conference, and utilities expenses. So this is the 5-year projection for general fund. For total revenues, as I mentioned before, is 35 million, and total expenditures, 37 million. Operation result, negative 2 million, and we have to add the capital items. And attached to the presentation, to the agenda item, are capital projects for 5 years. And so we have a net result negative 4.6 million. That means that we are tapping in our reserve for 4.6 million. So beginning fund balance. Beginning fund balance, those amounts are for annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year 24. So that's our audit report for fiscal year 24. Beginning fund balance for general fund is 37 million, 37.5 million. And the ending fund balance, if we have to deduct the net result, is 32 million. We are taking in consideration the operational reserve as council requested for 6 months. Operational reserve and the ending fund balance net of reserves, that means that money that we have left over after we keep aside our operational expenses for 6 months. So you can see that the trend is going to go on negative by fiscal year 28, by 615,000, and by fiscal year 30, 9 million negative.
I wanted to interrupt because what I wanted you guys to see is when it talks about capital items, take a look at that item. It starts in 25 by 2 million, 1 million, 461, 300, 800. Obviously, those are not real numbers. And that's why we're doing the capital improvement plan, to really put the numbers that are real, right? Is what are the actual needs? That's the lack of planning that we have not had for the next 5 years.
One expense for general fund is transfers out. It is other financial sources uses. That means transfers out, and I will explain what that means. General fund transfers out, that means that general fund is supporting other funds. We support HERF for roads and street improvements and maintenance, and we also are charged of to pay our debt. So we paying loans, and we support HERF. Every dollar transfers out is a dollar not available for general fund programs. These slides show 2 important parts of the general fund financial outlook. On the left, you can see our operational reserves, which represent 6 months of operating expenses, basically our safety cushion. The line stays strong through the 5-year plans, showing that we continue to meet our reserve policy even as costs increase. This means we are keeping enough savings to cover half of year of expenses in case of emergency or revenue delays. On the right, the chart shows the ending fund balance net of reserves, or what's left after we set aside those 6 months of reserves. Here you can see a steady decline, turning negative after fiscal year 28 and reaching about negative 9 million by fiscal year 30. That tells us that by fiscal year 28, we may need to start using part of our reserves to cover regular operation, which is not sustainable long term. So while our reserves remain healthy, our regular fund balance is trending down. This means we will need additional general fund resources and continued cost control to avoid depending on our reserves to balance the budget. And this graph shows how the net of reserves will be on the next 5 years. So by fiscal year 30th, we are negative by 9 million, and the message is without new revenues, our cushion disappears and financial flexibility is lost. To summarize, the general fund is our main checking account. Revenue must cover bills. Transfers out are necessary but reduce flexibility. Operational reserves equal 6 months of expenses or safety net. Urgent need. Additional general fund resources are required to avoid draining savings, sustain service as expenses rise faster than revenue, reduce reliance on subsidies to other funds. Without new revenues, we risk long-term financial strain. We wanted to add this slide to compare our budget for fiscal year with our current budget fiscal year 26. So we have been told that we increased our budget considerably for fiscal year 26, and which is correct. We increased it by 17 million, but those increases are mainly for grants. I highlight amongst the special revenue for community development and public safety, that's meaning grants. And the other large project that we have, as you already may know, is for wastewater, for the expansion of the wastewater treatment plant. So we did a conservative budget for fiscal year 26. On these slides, we can compare City of San Luis and City of Yuma revenues, because we often hear that on the City of Yuma, they have something and we don't have it. City of Yuma, they have many things that we don't have it. So we would like to review the city sales tax that the City of San Luis are getting for those are actual amount, and for the City of Yuma amounts, we took them from the City of Yuma website budget actual amounts and the state of Arizona Department of Revenue. So you can compare 18 million against 69 million only on city sales tax, and the urban revenue sharing and TPTs, which are sales tax and HERF. And that concludes our general fund.
One thing that Rola didn't mention, I mean, those are just, sales tax, some of that share revenue, but they get $12 million in property tax, in addition to, $17 million. So it kind of gives you a perspective that, why are we losing employees to the City of Yuma? Because they're getting paid $5, $6 more? Well, because they have the revenue. Or why are they offering more services than we? It kind of goes back to the same issue of the revenue. Can you go to the next presentation?
Highway user. I may sound repetitive. The trend for all the presentations are similar than the general fund. Highway user fund is the street maintenance and improvement funded primarily by state share highway user revenues. Highway user fund receives transfers in from general fund. And the fund balance, you will see that the highway user fund have a positive fund balance, but those balances are mainly for impact fees, not for operation. And we are keeping the policy to maintain 6 months for operating expenses. Our fiscal year 26, we budgeted 6.4 million and for expenditures 7.6 million, and we have a negative net result for 1.2 million. This chart shows highway user revenue, and the 62.1% is from the state, and the transfers in that from general fund subsidy is 26%. On this slide, you can see a graph for the amounts that general fund is transferred to HERF. Our mainly expenses on highway user fund is capital items, 46.3%, and salaries and related expenses is 20.4%. On the 5-year projection, you will see a positive balance, but as I said before, is mainly for impact fees. We cannot use impact fees for operation and maintenance. On this slide, you can see the operational reserve 6 months and the ending fund balance after or 6 months of reserves. HERF operations rely on state share revenues and the support that we get from general fund. Impact fees are restricted and increase the ending fund balance but cannot fund operations. Operational reserves protect service delivery, and our goal is reduce reliance on general fund transfers over time via grants, fee updates, and project timing. Water, please, Sonia. Water fund. What we need to know for the water fund. The purpose is deliver safe and reliable water services, invest in core infrastructure. The revenues charged for services are the primary source. Other revenues and interest provide a small share. Capital significant planned capital program across the 5-year period. Maintain operational reserves equal to 6 months of operation expenditures. We budgeted for water fund for fiscal year 26. We have a net result negative for 1.8 million. Our revenues are charged for services are 77.1%. Fiscal year 26 expenditures, capital outlay, capital items 49%, and salaries 12%. On 5-year projection, we have a positive fund balance, we have a positive reserves. You will see the operational reserves, the 6 months of expenses, and the ending fund balance net of reserves after the operating expenses. Charge for services drive the water fund. Other revenues and interests are modest. Operating results remain positive, but the capital program creates periodic cash drawdowns. Operational reserves 6 months are maintained across the plan. The ending fund balance net of reserves stay positive, but it's going to a little small by fiscal year 29 and improve again. Sonia, can you please pull up the wastewater fund?
Any questions from council so far? Thank you.
Treat wastewater safely and maintain expand plant capacity. Includes a water infrastructure finance authority on fiscal year 26 for the plant expansion. We will propose, we have a scheduled increase in January 2027, and we will propose a new rate study with upgrade targeted for January 2028. The policy, we are keeping the 6 months of reserve, operating expenses, and we are focused on managed large capital years while protecting reserves and service levels. We budgeted positive wastewater fund by 520,000. So those are the revenues for wastewater. Charge for services is 25.8%, and we are taking in consideration the WIFA loan is 72.7%. of the revenues. Expenses, most of the expenses are for capital items, 76.8%. Salaries and related expenses is 6.8%. The 5-year projection, we will see a negative fund balance after 6 months of operation expenses by fiscal year 29. On this slide, you can see the operation reserves, 6 months of expenses, and the ending fund balance net of reserves. By fiscal year 29 will be negative and fiscal year 30. To summarize, wastewater fund, so the debt proceeds fund the plant expansion, operational relay on charge for services. Operating results are positive, but large capital years drive cash drawdowns. Operational reserves 6 months are maintained, net of reserves turns negative by fiscal year 30th. We have a scheduled rate increase on January 2027, and we will propose a new rate study by fiscal year 27 to be effective on January 28. Sonia, can you please pull up solid waste, please?
I have a question.
Yes.
Go ahead, Councilmember Servin.
Regarding the WIFA fund, did we receive those funds already for the 26.24 million?
Councilmember Servin, we are processing the loan documents, and I believe for next council meeting, we will be proposing to City Council to approve the WIFA loan. So we are still processing the documents.
Okay, just because last week I spoke with our state rep, Mariana Sandoval, and she informed me that we were awarded the 26.24 million with a 1.5 million in forgivable principal. Is that what you're working on?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Solid waste. We don't have reserves. The fund is below policy. Begin fiscal year 26 with a negative balance and is projected to reach a positive balance by fiscal year 30. Even in fiscal year 30, the ending balance does not meet the 6-month operational reserve target. The action is fiscal year 27 rate study to move the fund towards financial recovery while maintaining essential services. We budgeted on solid waste positive 585,000. Our main source of revenue for solid waste is charge for services. The expenditures, the salaries and related expenses is 21%, and non-departmental is 36.5%. On 5-year projections, so we began a negative fund balance, and we will reach out positive by the end of fiscal year 30. This slide shows the operational reserves target against ending balance and the ending fund balance, net of reserves. Charge for services drive revenues, growth is modest over the plan. Operating results are positive, but capital and reserve policy requirements keep the fund below target. Ending balance turns positive by fiscal year 30, but net of reserves remains negative. The fiscal year 27 rate study is pivotal to restoring reserves and long-term stability. Ambulance fund. Please, thank you. What we need to know for ambulance fund is service charge grows steadily from 3.4 million to 4.1 million. Expenditures increase at similar pace, driven by salary and maintenance. Annual operating deficit, fund balance is used to sustain operations. We contracted with a local collection agency to strengthen revenues. We are keeping the 6 months operational reserves, and without new revenues or cost containment, the ending fund balance will continue to decline. We budgeted for fiscal year '26 a negative by $649,000. Our main source of revenue for ambulance is our charge for services. All the revenues on that slide mainly in grants. Salary and related expenses are 62.5% of total expenditures for ambulance fund. You can see on the 5-year projection, so we will be negative by next year. On this graph, you can see the operational reserves and the ending fund balance. So I include this slide for you to see our ambulance services by financial class. So you can see that Medicare is 28.82%, and Medicaid is 37.76% of our total charge for services that we provide. So our mainly transports are for Medicare and Medicaid. To summarize, the ambulance fund is the service demand supports steady revenue growth, but costs rise in parallel. Operation deficit persists, capital spending occurs in fiscal year '26. Operational reserves 6 months are maintained, but the ending fund balance net of reserve remains negative through the plan. Our priorities is continue collection improvements, pursue new revenue options, and target cost efficiencies. And that concludes my presentation.
Sonia, if you can put back my presentation.
I have a question.
Go ahead,
Council-
Councilmember Servin.
Yes, regarding the funds for the fire department, do we foresee any additional revenue or funding now that once we have the 2 new hospitals in town? Are they calculated already in the figures that you just presented? If any?
No, on the projection that we have, we don't include any revenues that we are going to receive from the hospitals or new projects.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm going to follow up with my presentation. So you guys kind of saw the numbers, right? Again, our proposal is, as the best practice as stated by the GFOA, is structurally balanced budget, one that supports financial sustainability for multiple years into the future. So why weren't we doing that in the previous years? We don't know, but we understand that going from one year to the next, we were not truly balancing our budget. So what is the issue? The issue is that our tax revenue is over-dependent on a single sector. Rola mentioned that 94% came from the sales tax and the share revenue. So if Mexico builds a Walmart across the border, that's going to impact our sales tax. If the state legislature cuts our food tax, that's going to affect our revenue. One-time large expenditures have caused strain on our budget, leading to reduction of services. We have large projects. We have the well sites, we have Cesar Chavez Boulevard, we have major road projects. So we know we need them, but that has really put a strain on our budget, which means that there might be more money going into HERF, meaning that we have a project, but there's less community events. Reduction of state taxes and federal grants, which I just mentioned. The federal grants, unfortunately, the last applications that were submitted, they weren't funded because of the change of administration. For the Cesar Chavez Boulevard, the grant that we got awarded, it took them over a year, close to a year and a half to actually get us a contract. So we don't foresee that we're gonna be getting a lot of grants. City services are not keeping up with community growth. I mean, I think that's very obvious, right? You know, our roads are not keeping up with traffic, our water, wastewater are not keeping up with the growth, so we need to put this infrastructure in, but, you know, we gotta find the revenues to pay for it. Inadequate long-range planning, as I mentioned, we never looked at the 5 years. We looked at the historical, which is important, but we were not looking at the next 5 years. We were going from one year to another. So proposed solutions. One, I think we really need to understand what our needs are in terms of that capital improvement plan that we're working on, because those numbers were not real. So if those numbers, if you increase that amount because you know that there's much more need, those numbers are gonna be much more negative. So we really, truly need to understand what those capital projects is, what is a need, and what is a want. Because a community might want more roads, but you know what? Maybe our expansion of our wastewater treatment plant is the need, the necessity. So that will give you, the council, you know, an opportunity to really, really prioritize these projects. Ensure transparency and communication. During our meeting with the department directors and all the high-level staff, you know, we talked about, you know, what are the issues, because we had never looked at the 5-year projections. You know, we had never really talked about those numbers. What I wanted is, and this is exactly what I told the staff, is you're looking at what I'm looking at. Those numbers, I'm not making up those numbers. Those are the numbers that we have. So what is it that we need to do to try to make a change so that people truly believe us and understand that those are the numbers? So when we're making decisions, and when council or when staff is making a recommendation and council's making the decisions, we want the community to understand why we're making those decisions. Not because we don't want events, not because the staff doesn't deserve salary increases, not because we don't need projects or road projects. It's because of those revenues that are coming in and are limiting some of the services and the projects and the programs that we can provide. So we have some strategies on how to do more of that communication with the community to truly understand those numbers. Keep them simple. You know, we have a household, we have a checking account, you know, we have savings. You know, obviously I want a larger, nicer, newer car, but I can only afford what I have right now, so that's what I have to afford. It's very similar, right? Implement a new budgeting measures. Rola and I have been working on, you know, we put, I don't know, minor tools, we put $50,000. Well, for next year, the departments are gonna have to justify that $50,000. You know, why do you need another $50,000? You know, did you buy the printer? Did you buy, and I'm making it very simple, but they're gonna have to justify so that they're working with us to try to cut some of that cost. Pursue operational efficiency. Again, we talked about how can we do this better, you know, more efficient at a lesser cost. So that's the task that I've given a lot of the department directors to really go back and look and say, what can we do better at a lesser cost? And then the long-term planning, which is what we're talking about, you know, seeing those 5-year projections and really diversifying our revenue. So what is it that we need to do, you know, to fix this issue? So one item that is going to be presented at the work session with the county is a transportation sales tax. This tax has been talked about for years, from my understanding, but that has never gone to the electors because this is something that the voters throughout Yuma County would have to approve. Now, I'm not going to go into the detail because in that work session, the Yuma County is going to explain the details, but it shows you, you know, we were getting $3 million, right, from the HERF, And if we get another 3 million, that's 7 million. That's something we can do with the project. Now, those revenues had continued to decrease. We have electrical vehicles that are still using our roads, but they're not paying that tax. So what can we do? We know that we need, it's not just new roads, it's the maintenance of the existing roads. Property tax. I know that that is an issue that is very sensitive to the community. But you saw the numbers. When City of Yuma gets $17 million in property tax, they can use that money to do what we've been restricted to do. Well, we're being conservative and we're saying, you're not gonna get a salary increase, you're not gonna get this community events, you're not gonna get this projects. Well, that gives us the ability, because it's revenue that is constant, because our sales tax, is gonna come in, but any changes in the environment could change that. The building permits, the fees are coming in, but if we stop growth, that's not gonna come in. Now, I told you about my commitment in some of the city fees. It's taking us a little while, but we're getting there. We looked at the impact fees. There's some revenues that we implemented. Business license fee. We hadn't updated them since how many years? Does anybody remember? 19 years? 19 years? Is that what it? The core fees. Now, the core fees, they're not supposed to make any revenue, right? But we did implement because they were all fees. So when we took a look at what else can we do? The utility rates, if we need to expand our wastewater treatment plant in the east, we're gonna have to do a utility rate. A hospitality tax. Why do we have to wait for a hotel to come in? If we can just establish it, and when it comes in, we're ready to start collecting. The business incubator fees, they haven't been updated for the past 10 years or more. The park fees, they haven't been updated. Police, the clerk, development service, all these fees have not been updated for years. Now, I'll have to be very blunt, but these are pennies compared to what the revenues that would come in from a transportation sales tax or a property tax. They can help us. And we're really not making money out of this additional fees. We're just trying to cut even into what it costs to provide a service. We just want to break even at this point. These are some examples. I asked staff, well, give me some examples of what we could do. For example, utilities said, well, every time you go and you pay your utility bill and you use a card, there's certain fees that we end up eating it up. If we pass on this fee to the user, we could get $37,000 in income. Just an example. Police, I said, PD, what can we do? Well, we're charging 50 cents per hour, but the other parking, we don't want to compete with the businesses, but the other parkings are charging $7 flat rate. Fingerprints, $8 to $20. Again, pennies compared to a bigger, but it kind of gives you a sense. Illegal water connection citations. Should we be charging a fee for somebody illegally connecting? Every time there's a sign out there that our staff has to go and pick up that sign and bring it to one of our facilities. Should there be a fee? Our economic development, we have all the parking that we got from the Bureau of Reclamation. Can we fence it off and start charging, even if it's small charge? We have all the agriculture workers are parking there. Can we start that? The clerk's electronic data, can we start charging that? Again, administrative fee for the encroachment permit. A false alarm fee, your alarm sounds, the fire department is out there. Should we be charging them for that? Is our staff going out there? When Councilmember Sembin, you talked about the hospital. Well, the policy, the Medicare that is being cut at the federal government, that's going to trigger down to us because we depend on those fees. As you saw the charts, how much was it? What was the percentage? So how are these people going to pay us? Because we cannot refuse service 28%. We cannot refuse that service, so are we gonna eat up that cost? So those are the type of policies that affect us. Now, we're not alone in this. I know it sounds a little bit negative, but we're not alone. Now, I'm not gonna name the organization, but today I'm part of a board, and I was there, and I asked the organization, how do you do financial stability in your organization? The person said, my 5-year projections. He said, I might have to tap into revenue because the policies that are happening up in, the federal government at the state, it might impact our operations. I might have to cut programs. I might have to let people go. Those were the answers, and I was hearing him, and I was thinking, gosh, it's my presentation tonight, So we're not alone on this. I know that the current environment is a little bit tough because we're not getting the grants, because, the cost of projects are high. But I think we cannot blind ourselves and just go from one year to another. I think what we have to do is really plan ahead and say, okay, where we're going? We have to be proactive and try to make some adjustments, to our budget. Yes, the community wants a lot. But if we don't have the revenues to provide those wants, then we're gonna have to make decisions, but we wanna be able to tell the community and explain to them why we're making the decision. It's not because they don't deserve it, it's not because, we don't think it's a need, it's because we have limitations. So that kind of concludes our presentation. We kept it to an hour. Again, I think the presentations to our staff was 3 hours because we went into the detail. I wanted them to understand what I was seeing. It was a very productive work session with them, or meeting, and I hope it was as productive for the council as well. But Rola and I are open to any questions, and so is the staff behind me.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from council?
How many of our projects are grant dependent or awaiting funding for grants right now?
How many projects
What percentage of our projects are relying on grants or?
for the grants?
Sonia, can you open the attachment for capital project is attached to the agenda item, please? It's on the agenda item. Okay, the last one, yes.
I have it here.
Oh. So it's economic development, so how many projects is
For grants?
the EDA grants?
This one, 40,
Oh, yeah, 44.
44 million.
For the 6 years? 5 years.
It's only 3 years because that's it. So if you look at the capital improvement plan, when it comes to grants, this was included as part of some of the grants that economic development was applying, and we're not including, police or any other grants, but it was 3 years and it was 44 million. But I could tell you right now that, for example, the EPC grants, all that, cut that out. That's not gonna get funded. Let me see which one else. The other ones, Community Resilient Hub, that's out. The Entrepreneur Center, that's out. Again, it just leaves the CDBG. Again, unfortunately, we are not getting a lot of the grants that we had applied. We had applied for some lightings for parks. We are not gonna get that money. So it's a lot of grant money that kind of blows up the budget, but we're not going to get those grants. And I know it's been very difficult, not because of the lack of trying, and it's just the funding is not there at this point. No. We're hoping that changes, but at this point, but at this time, that's what you're looking at.
Councilmember Cabrera?
Thank you for the presentation. So I see what you guys are presenting to council as into some of the strategies we can implement, but at the end of the day, we are here to support you guys and all the employees. So what can we do on our behalf to support you guys? I mean, I know we do our San Luis Day at the Capitol that started this year. We're gonna continue reaching out to our representatives, but how can we help you and how can we support your projects to make sure that we're not taking away from one department for another? Because sometimes it feels like they might take it as, oh, my department is not that important. And it's not the case that it's not important. So I don't want anybody to feel that way. But you're telling us this is what we can do as in you guys, but also what can we do as your local leaders?
Well, I think the number one is make sure that you continue to talk to our legislators at the state level to make sure that there's no more additional cuts from that share revenue because of the dependency. I think that hopefully if the federal government tries to come up with some new programs, try to get grants. Changes in policy like that Medicare cut, that's really gonna hurt us. It might, be made up in Washington, but the ambulance, we cannot refuse service and we still have to, that's gonna affect us. When it comes to some of the fees, I know we don't wanna charge the community, but if we're gonna establish fees and we're gonna waive them, then it defeats the purpose, and again, these are pennies. Help us communicate to the community, what you're seeing, and we can figure out a way to make it more simple, more explainable to them, so that they believe us that, it's not that we don't want to provide the service, it's our limitations. Help us get the word out. And, you're going to have to make some of the tough decisions, so prioritizing. And all we can do is, I think we have a very good team, and they understand, when everybody had to say, hey, all departments, you're not gonna get any positions, but public safety needs them right now. And everybody supported it, their support. So I think they'll be a very good team players and say, hey, I can do my project next year. I can hold off. But take our recommendation into consideration because we're also making some tough recommendations that it might not be as favorable to the community. But you're the elected officials. You're the one that is facing the community on a daily basis.
Thank you. And then another comment, just from an observation that I did regarding the numbers of the funding. I know you talked about the 2.5 flat rate, but also during the time, the projections of the 9 million, part of that growth was due to all the funding that was being given to the community through stimulus checks, through the unemployment. So that had a trickle effect on our budget, and we were expecting that to happen because I remember talking to Monica once, and she said, yeah, we're getting all this revenue projections for next year. Our budget is gonna inflate, but it's not gonna maintain that way because that money is like a one-time thing. So I know that we were able to get some projects done that we had been putting on hold because she was very conservative through the COVID years where she wasn't allowing projects to get funded because we didn't know where the economy was going. And all of those projects were shovel ready, we had the money, but then we had the problem of inflation. All of the costs went up, and that's something that also we need to make sure the community understands because, yeah, we can tell them like, oh, we're negative in these departments and we need to update this fees, and they're gonna continue getting the same service, but they're gonna be paying more money. And we need to make sure we educate them to, you're paying more money because everything is getting expensive. The trucks to sweep the floors on the streets, the garbage cans or the garbage trucks, all those things continue to go up in prices, and we continue to pay the same rates that we've been paying. And yeah, I mean, I was one of the ones that voted in favor of the water increase that happened. I think all of us did, but we're here to make those tough decisions, but also we need to make sure that our communications department does a good job in making sure that the community understands why we're asking for them to pay more. it's not that they're, sadly, it's not that they're gonna get more, but they're gonna continue getting the service that they're getting.
Thank you, Councilmember Cabrera. When is the 5-year CIP gonna be done, finished? The one we're paying for? The CIP?
The,
General fund?
No, the CIP that we were gonna pay 100K for.
the CIP program? Where is the process, or what's the
When is it
question?
gonna be done?
Is by June 30th. But we're hoping that, we already had initial meetings with the department directors, and we asked them to do the wish list. I think that by the time of the presentation, I'm sorry, by the budget retreat, I think we're gonna have some of those priorities to some extent, because you're looking at not 5 years, you're actually looking at 6 years, because we're already in one of the first years, right, that this is gonna take into account. And then we gotta think of the next 5 years. So it's the 6 years that we're looking at. But ultimately, it's gonna be completed by June 30th.
Thank you. And I've been talking about financial stability and long-term planning for over a decade now, so I understand what you're saying. When is the annual financial report for 25 going to be done?
It surprised us to receive the draft today. We just received it today, so we have to work on some pending items, and I believe it will be done before the holidays. December, before December holidays.
Okay. Did you see a big difference by any chance in our statement of net projections in assets and cash or not?
And yeah, you will see everything on the account.
So we'll know the difference between year 24 and 25.
Yeah, we will have updated fund balances. As I mentioned, we did receive an email today. We have not reviewed it with detail yet, and we still have pending items to complete, to finalize.
Thank you. Anyone else from council?
For the rates that we want to go up for on the services, do you have any rate studies done yet for the rates that you guys want to go up on? What are they looking like? How much for all these services that we're trying to raise?
For the rate fee, the utility rate, you mean, or for all the fees? For all the fees, what we're doing is some of them we're using some consultants, some of them we're using some research to try to see what other communities are charging. So it's a combination, The utility rate obviously is a consultant that comes in and does a study. Business Incubator is working with the study, and all the other ones is more of some of the research comparing ourselves to other communities.
Another question that I have is the reserves, do we keep them in an account that generate income for the community, for the city, or is that just at the bank? Like, are they in a particular program that they're generating revenue for the city, or no?
The investments, the assets.
The
the one
investment,
that I just
yes.
asked you about.
Yeah, the investment, yes, we do have them on the Arizona State Treasurer.
Anyone else from council?
Yes.
Councilor Servin?
I just want to say it was a great presentation. I see the work and the time all of you invested in planning for the future of San Luis. I appreciate everyone's input. To me, I see this as a roadmap for us, for all of us, and we can certainly adjust yearly if necessary. I know that the current administration plays a huge role in the decisions we are making today or projecting, but I believe things will get better. Just like all of you took the initiative to think outside the box, I believe we as council members need to step in and think outside the box too, by advocating more for the opportunities they presented. And I will commit myself to advocate for that transportation sales tax, and I will look into the property tax and all the other fees you just mentioned. I'll be also in the lookout for grants to change those negative projections. It's really hard to project on something with the times that we are living in right now, so uncertainty. Right now, you can request a proposal for something, and 6 months down the road, that proposal is not it's not the same anymore. So it's really hard to project, but I like the fact that we're going through this roadmap, this 6-year planning. This is great. And I just want to say that I'm with all of you. I support you. And also, Jenny, you have a great team. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Councilmember Servin. Um, Seeing no further questions or comments and no further business on the agenda, I'm going to adjourn the meeting, the work session at 7:05 p.m. Thank you, staff. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for watching us online. Have a good evening.